Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final speaker series in our 2015, 2016 series. We're wrapping up our program year in August, and we have reached our final speaker. But this is definitely saving the best for the last type of situation. So we're excited to have Sally Prouty with the National Conference on Citizenship here with us today, and I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Heather Mercer and Andrea Summerlin. I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. If you're having any technical difficulties, if your screen freezes, etc., just refresh and it should keep it going. If you have any questions at any time you'd like to ask Sally, please feel free to type them in the chat and I'll try to incorporate them into the conversation as much as possible. Heather and Andrea, if you just want to introduce yourself really quickly, and then I'll give Sally a chance to introduce herself.
Sure. I'm Heather Mercer, and I'm calling in from Spokane, Washington. I'm currently an intern with the History Group. I'm in my last semester of my MSW from University of Southern California, and my focus area is women with a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome.
Thanks, Heather.
Hi, I'm Andrea Summerlin. I'm calling in from the Oregon coast, Walport, Oregon. I finished the internship in December of last year. I'm also in my final semester at USC with the MSW program, and my focus area was youth development and veteran and military families.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. And I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Vanessa Bailey, President and CEO of the History Group. And as many of you know, we have an internship program to connect individuals who are interested in social good or social change careers. And the career series is specifically to allow them to hear of the career paths of people who are kind of already in this space. And so we're really excited to have Sally here today. So Sally, why don't you introduce us to yourself?
Thank you, Thanera and Andrea and Heather. It's nice to be joining you. I'm happy that it's a relaxed conversation. Look forward to that. I have been in this space for a very long time. I am in the civic engagement, service learning, community development space. At this point in time, I'm serving as the interim CEO of the National Conference on Citizenship, and I look forward to telling you a little bit about that. And then I am also a senior fellow with an organization called PACE, and that is Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement.
So thanks, Sally. Why don't you, civic engagement kind of sometimes gets broad strokes. What do you view as kind of, what does that mean? What is that role, and what is the role of civic engagement in creating social change?
You know, that's a really good question because it is interpreted differently sort of across the board. And in my current role, NCOC, the National Conference on Citizenship, has a 10-year history of studying civic health and publishing civic health indices. From that comes a focus on civic life. So I've come to understand civic engagement better as I have, after many years, as I have been thinking with people who are talking about civic health and civic life. And for our purposes here, we think of civic life as how communities organize, how people in communities organize their thinking and their activities to solve community problems. So that's an interesting way of thinking about civic engagement. So average people on the street are often engaged civically. They don't call it civic engagement, but certainly if we thought seriously about it, I think they might call it civic life. And so stimulating increased engagement of citizens to think about the communities, however they define community, and how they might solve problems in community has become what I think an important definition of the larger picture of civic engagement.
Yeah, I love that definition because it encompasses kind of the everyday things that people do to think about their communities, to create change in their communities, to address the issues that are problematic to them in their neighborhoods and in their areas. And I think so often at least for me professionally, civic engagement has been tied to youth and has been tied to kind of incorporating understanding of your role as a citizen in society, not so much as kind of something that everyone is connected to or everyone is involved in. And I like that. It's much more inclusive.
Mm-hmm. And you know, Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr., said, everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And how we think about civic life and serving each other is really important. I think a part of what has happened in the civic engagement space is that we define it as service, and we look at paid service, stipended service, and we talk about service learning, we talk about strategies around service, and sometimes the conversation is limited as it relates to the whole of the community.
Yeah. And I think I always say this to the interns, nothing happens in a silo. Nothing that we're trying to create or change happens in a silo. And so everyone does play a role in moving our communities forward, on improving those issues. And so that much broader kind of perspective, I think, allows people to all take ownership, but also allows everyone to have a voice at the conversation. So you're in the interim CEO role at the National Conference on Citizenship, but this is not a new role to you. You've been in the director or the management position role before. So what does a typical day, if that even exists, week, month, in the leadership role at the helm of an organization, and then maybe a little bit more specifically in this role at the National Conference on Citizenship?
Okay, well, it's a really good question, and the sort of succinct answer is every day is different. And rarely, my days for many years have not been predictable, have not been established in ways that I can not, as I would change my perception of being in a leadership role from that of being project manager. So project managers, in my experience, and as I've been in that role, have an assignment, and it has a sequence, a sequential activity that leads to, or at least hopefully leads to, completion of the project. In the leadership roles in organizations that I've experienced, it has been much more thinking strategically about where are we today, where can we go tomorrow, what is it going to take for us to get there. It's great to think long-term and do strategic planning, except rarely in my experience in leadership have I been able to lead in a direction that fits with a strategic plan, because things are not predictable, and funders change, funding changes, missions change, boards change. In the nonprofit world, boards of directors are instrumental in determining. So as the input changes, then what we're doing in leadership roles has to change to accommodate. And I have to say that I like that. I'm challenged by trying to figure things out, and I think that's probably what has allowed me to stay engaged in leadership roles for a number of years.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you with the... Oh, I'm sorry, Sally. Go ahead.
I was going to say typical day, typical month, typical year. They're all atypical is what I was going to say.
There's no such thing. Yeah, I like your point about the strategic planning, because so often I hear from organizations that we work with, or I sit on the board of my local Y, and they're thinking about going through the strategic planning process. And my feedback to them was, you should probably think a little bit more just about the vision and the things that you want, but be much more flexible than developing this plan that you think that you can achieve and work towards. And they had, with the recent change in labor, that really impacted their ability to pay their staff and to think about overtime and things like that. And so they had this great strategic plan, but now it's kind of put on fire because they can't follow some of those costs that are related to it. And so I love that point that you can have it, but at the same time, you have to be flexible and prepared for the unknown, I guess, that comes with leading in the dynamics that nonprofits face.
I'm thinking of one more thing, Sanira, on that subject, and that is we're currently working with Center for Regional Development at Purdue University, and in that center there is an economist, his name is Ed Morrison, who's advising our work and helping us think about NCOC, and in the center he's been a part of developing a methodology for what he calls strategic doing. And he says, and I agree with him, that strategic planning is not an effective tool for today's work. Not that we shouldn't have them, and he says we've moved from strategic planning to strategic thinking, which again is a good thing, but his advocacy at this point is around strategic doing, and he says you embark on a journey of doing, and you learn as you go, and you adapt as you go, which is kind of what I was talking about, but the methodology that they are advancing is most interesting to me, and I think it's a great way to think about today's world, today's rapidly changing world, and how we accommodate it.
Absolutely. I think I would love for you to share that with us if you have any resources from him. But it falls straight in line with the kind of thinking that I kind of believe and push for, because I think so often nonprofits will have a really great plan, even like program plans, if we break it down to less of the strategic vision, but more about just getting through the program year. And there'll be partners that will face a crisis, or funding that won't come all the way through, or local dynamics. I think, all of the can you hear us, Sally? I think she might be frozen. Can you all hear her?
No, I can't hear her.
Okay. Well, I'll keep talking and hopefully she'll come back. So the multiple dynamics that nonprofits face, often they'll have a really great plan for their program, and then something will happen. They won't recruit as many people, they won't reach the goal, and they have to adjust to that. And if you can already have this mindset of thinking strategically in the process and not be so tied to, well, we said we were going to do it this way, and that's the way we're going to proceed, even if it's failing us. In the end, you'll probably be more likely to reach your goals than if you're very like, this was the plan and we're going to just stick with the plan and not incorporating the new information, new systems, new ways of reaching your goals. Are you back, Sally?
I'm back. Thank you.
All right. No problem. Sometimes the technology is a little bit tricky. So from Heather or Andrea, did you have any questions before I continue with mine? And Heather, go ahead.
About, Sally, what you were talking about, how you're challenged by the fact that there's never a schedule and things are always popping up and you really enjoy that. What are some skills that you think you possess that help you kind of ride the wave? Because I mean, I think it's inevitable. We know that it's never going to be the way we plan, but how as a leader do you take that in stride and kind of work with that and also help those who work with you kind of go through it without having a crisis?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, Heather. The thing that comes to my mind as you're talking is we all think differently and we have different experiences. Excuse me. Let me take a drink of water. One of the things that I've encouraged over the years is consideration of, say, Myers-Briggs or personality considerations about how people think and act. In the Myers-Briggs indicators, I am an ENFP, which is a grossly disorganized person who has some talent maybe, but so I have to force myself to be scheduled and organized in ways that allow me to be productive, but it also allows me to be in the sort of visionary space in a very comfortable way. So I think my bent is just to be comfortable. And my challenge is to work with teams of individuals who come from different places, who need structure, some who need very definite structure, and for us to acknowledge that to each other and to think about how we mutually support each other in being able to accommodate.
Sally, I know in leadership positions, just to kind of build off of Heather's question, you also are sometimes put with different personality types, and having to recruit and find people who balance your strengths and who are able to kind of grow with you. How do you think people who are put in those positions can seek out the people who balance them, instead of what I think we tend to do is find people who are more the same, who are more similar to us in our work to kind of connect to?
That's a really, really good point, because we do sort of naturally attract those who think like us. And I'll tell you that sitting beside me today at the table is Sarah Stack, who is exceptionally well organized and who came to NCOC really 1 week before I did. So we've been learning about it together. But because she is here and because she keeps me on track, we've been able to accomplish significantly more than if we were dependent upon me to keep on track and do the things that I need to get done. So I think that's a conscious effort to seek to be aligned with people who are who add potential that really isn't within us. Also, I think we can learn, as I said, I have to really force myself to approach things in a methodical way. And I make lists, and I use the calendar, and I don't mean there's nothing on my calendar when I come in the morning, because the calendar is sometimes full. And I have to force myself to accommodate that. But I need help from people who are more structured than I am.
Mm-hmm. In a lot of your roles, particularly in the last several years as a PACE fellow and then now in this interim position, you're entering kind of dynamics that are already moving around you. There's structures, there's culture, there's things that predate your existence. I think part of one of the hard challenges with change is that getting comfortable with that you don't know, and there's going to be people who know a lot more than you. How have you handled that challenge of often coming in a leadership role where you have some power and some privilege with that, but you have this team and group that you have to look to who really are probably maybe more informed to the work and the goals?
That's a great point too. Being a good listener is important. One of the things that I've learned, and this is my second interim role, one of the things that I've learned is that to get up to speed quickly requires some real intentionality, and then to be able to work with people who have been working longer term in the space in ways that add value. So I would hope that my time invested in organizations adds value, but builds on what has been the history. And I tend to have 50 ideas all at the same time. So sorting out ideas that might be useful to an organization is really something that I have to concentrate on. So when I came to NCOC and listened to, first of all, the board of directors who had guidance for me, and then amazing staff. I have a wonderful, wonderful team here. And listening to them and thinking with them, I then had the opportunity to take what I had learned and put it into a format for all of these people, staff and board, to consider. And I was able to make recommendations regarding how I thought we could build on what has been the history. And they've been receptive to that. So it is, I tend, when I get an idea that's seems right to me. I'm a pusher. I push and push and push, and I'm persistent in that, probably in ways that I'm probably too pushy sometimes. But I feel the urgency of the short amount of time to get things done. So I'm really trying hard to be respectful to what has been, and also to bring my best thinking about today into the mix and build on it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any key differences in maybe your perspective of the role, knowing that there's a timeline on it when you're an interim compared to being the leader with just kind of that natural career path that grows? Are there things that you prioritize differently or think about differently when you're in that role?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the two times that I've been in the interim role, I've been asked by the board to consider where the organization has been and to make recommendations regarding going forward. So that's been a privilege for me because I don't know the answers, I'm not necessarily right, but it seems to me that building on and establishing new directions is a good thing. I like that change process. Getting other people on board then is a challenge because we all know that people like to do what they've always done. And that's not a criticism, that's just the way it is. So yes, I view it differently. I was in a role of CEO for 10 years with one organization, the Core Network, and that was good, but I didn't have the same sense of urgency that I have in doing the very best I can do in a short period of time as an interim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would assume that when you kind of have the day-to-day, I'm sure you also get pulled into some of the day-to-day when you're the CEO that will be there indefinitely. But when you're the interim, people probably don't throw the fluff work at you because they really want to take and make the best use of your time with the organization. And so you really probably get to focus on maybe some of the things that really are important and that are most urgent rather than maybe the stuff that could get done but doesn't have to get done right now.
I think that's probably true. However, the business of the organization goes on, so you still have the financial management to consider. In this organization, we're about to move to a new office. So working with Sarah, I've had the opportunity to evaluate offices and to try to plan around what the organization is going to be, what does it need. So there are sort of on-the-ground pieces of the work that still have to be done. So there's urgency to that, but the sort of strategic direction is the piece that I feel the most sense of urgency about.
That makes sense. Heather or Andrea, before I jump in, Andrea, you can just unmute yourself if you had a question.
Yeah, this is kind of shifting gears a little bit based on some of the research that I did prior to this webinar, and I was just I was reading some of the reports on your website, and I saw that the closest to me was Seattle. There's no partnership with anyone in Oregon, and I saw some of the reports saying that the research is showing that most people are joiners, not connectors, and I wanted to see if you had any suggestions on how maybe we can make or how we can advise or somehow bridge that gap to have people be more connected instead of just joining just because maybe that's what they think they need to do.
So this is Sally, and I lost, I think, about 3/4. The screen was frozen for.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Oh, she's frozen again.
Oh no. Did anyone hear my question?
I heard your question, so I think it's on her end.
Okay.
So you're saying that in Oregon, oh, there you are, Sally. I can see you blinking.
Okay.
So go ahead, Andrea, say your question one more time.
Oh, so I'm located in Oregon in a rural area, and I did a little bit of research from the website, and it showed the closest to me for report-wise was Seattle, Washington, and
yes.
Some of the reports show that a lot of people are considered joiners, not connectors, and I just wanted to see if there was any advice or suggestions on how we can bridge that gap and get more people connected instead of just joining activities and not really doing anything with that, maybe?
That's a really good question, too. So NCOC has as its tagline, connecting people, strengthening America. And connecting people, getting people connected is the challenge. It's a huge challenge. So I would suggest that people need an individual invitation to be connected, that in most instances, and not all certainly, but in most instances, people who are invited in a general way, my experience would say, are less likely to make a connection. And so one-on-one relationships, personal invitations, personal encouragement, I think, although that's labor intensive, it takes time and energy, is the beginning of connection. And we all want to be recognized and we want to be viewed as important. And the more those of us who want people to be connected are able to recognize and encourage people, I think the more likely they are to be engaged.
Thank you. That really helps a lot.
Did you have any more questions, Andrea?
No, I'm not right this moment.
Okay, perfect. So, Sally, could you tell us a little bit? I know we were talking before we started just about some work that you're doing at NCOC to engage and have dialogue about a few main topics. What is kind of on the horizon for your work in these next few months with the organization? Did you freeze again?
I think so.
She always comes back, though. It just takes a minute usually. If anyone has any questions in the audience, feel free to type them in the chat. Or if you have questions and you're watching the replay, feel free to type them also in the chat. Oh, we lost her completely. So hopefully she'll log back in. There we go. Sally, are you there?
I'm just now back. I was lost for a bit.
That's okay. It happens all the time, My question was, what is on the horizon for NCOC over these next few months while you're in this role?
So I'm very excited to share that we are preparing for a convening in Washington, D.C. that will be October 13th and 14th, and it is building on the work of Civic Health Index over a 10-year period, and the networks of individuals and organizations that have been involved in Civic Health Index. Our focus this year is on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it's on incorporating audiences, individuals and organizations who have not previously been engaged in the civic engagement, civic life discussions. So we are intentionally reaching out to humanities councils and libraries and healthcare and workforce development and youth development and the mental health arenas, physical health and wellness. We are hopeful that this working convening, which is the annual conference, will encourage a much broader discussion and then a cooperative learning experience, which post-convening will actually have action associated with it, that people will take home skills, abilities, resources, connections, as going back to our prior question, that they didn't have before, and will be able to utilize those in their efforts going forward. So the idea is to substantially increase the influence of those like you all who are already engaged when working with people who don't have a good understanding of what you know, what you've experienced, what are people who understand the importance of civic life are able to share, and also what our civic life, civic engagement people can learn from people who are outside the work. So you're all invited. We'll hope that you will share the information and consider. Our event will be at the Wardman Marriott in DC. It will be a dinner on the evening of the 13th and an all-day activity on the 14th. The cost is $150, and we hope that we'll be able to fill 400 to 500 seats. So it should be a substantial gathering of people who care a great deal about things that you care about.
That's great. And affordable, especially if you're on the East Coast and in that part of the country. What within organizations, what roles do you think should or would be most helpful to this convening? Is it the executive role? Is it the program role? Is it the fundraising role? Is it the outreach, marketing, communications? All? Who should be at the table if an organization is deciding who to send?
This is another good question, Thanera, because I'm thinking that people who care that this is happening and want to engage in the conversation are the right people to attend. So I think choosing by job assignment may not be the best strategy. Rather, who's attracted to the idea of learning from other people who are different from many of us, and also being able to share what you know with people who are different, come from different places. I just think it's more about people who care and are enthused about the opportunity than it is about. It doesn't have to be CEOs, or it could be. That's great, but hopefully it would be people who really are interested and want to contribute and learn.
Yeah, and that probably will give you the best outcomes and information, is that you'll really get a chance to hear from. And I think so often, I ask the question because it's a pretty typical kind of thing and viewpoint with nonprofits is, oh, this is the development role, or this is the programmatic role. And I've been to many events where I didn't feel like the right person was the attendee because of exactly what you're saying. There's not a professional passion or professional interest or personal passion or personal interest in the goals of the conversation. And so they attend, but they're not necessarily helpful. So that's great. So when you think back on kind of your career journey that's led you to this role now, what do you think are some of the key skills that you've gained from other positions that led you here or prepared you for what you're doing today?
So, another good question. So I
We
grew
try
up.
to always have.
They're all good. They're all good questions, and you make me think. So I grew up in a home where I didn't know the word service or civic engagement, but it was a part of our lives. So I grew up in a rural area, one of 4 children. My father was a minister, and so there was a congregation of people who supported each other and who helped each other, who did the kinds of things that we're now advocating. So I grew up in that atmosphere. I went off to, so I'm a nurse. So I went off to school. I became an RN. I worked in what is sort of a service-oriented field, and I had a lot of interesting experiences in nursing. And then I had kids. I have 2 children. And when they were in elementary school, I became aware, my son, when he was in 5th grade, came home from school and said, Adam went to treatment. And then he said, and we played football at recess, and we did this and that. And I said, what on earth does it mean that Adam went to treatment? It was this wonderful little boy that I knew. And he said, it's something about drinking beer. And I said, oh, in 5th grade. So I marched myself down to the principal's office the next morning and said, help me understand what that means. And he said, the truth of the matter is, Adam overdosed on alcohol, has been stealing alcohol from his parents' cabinet for years, for some time, he didn't say for years, and that he is hospitalized and was critically ill.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
children were told that he went to treatment, and I was absolutely blown away. This is a small town, rural Ohio. And I got involved in what's happening in the drug alcohol treatment and prevention area, and spent the next few years really working intentionally as a volunteer in that area. At a point when I thought I had some good recommendations to make to the school system, I went to the superintendent, made my proposal, and he said, "Frankly, Sally, I'm not interested." He said, "Programs come, programs go." I was beside myself. So I marched out, ran for the school board, got on the school board, did what I could do for 2 terms on the school board to change that picture. And so it went from there to being increasingly public things. So my learning experience was just trying to figure out, as you all are, answers to what are the challenges that we face. And I have maintained over the years, I learned that young people who are caught in the drug alcohol maze, who are court involved, have been incarcerated, who have dropped out of school, have all the same potential that my own kids have, and more probably than my own kids. And my kids are in good places, but I know how much it took in terms of support for them to get there. So that was a long-winded way of saying I've spent most of the rest of my life really advocating for individuals who are out of the mainstream, and in particular children, youth, and young adults who have been challenged, and that's how I met Venera. So there. So I've forgotten what the question was.
How do you, well, you answered it though, because a part of what your role is now in this interim CEO is to kind of assess and listen and see what people are saying is kind of the challenges the organization is facing in a short period of time, come up with recommendations and suggestions. It sounds like they weren't always taken, as the superintendent kind of was like, yeah, that's nice, but that your natural advocate personality took over, and that has continued to kind of make it probably possible for you to join, like we said, these places where people are used to doing things the way they always have. It sounds like to me in that story and the history of kind of what brought you to this point, from nursing to something more connected to civic engagement, is really pushing against that. But yeah, that's great that's what we've always done, but let me just try and show you what, if we just shifted a little bit, what we might find out or what we might be able to do. And that, yes, my kids and my family are great, but we have a responsibility for everybody to be at the table and to have these same opportunities and experiences. And you're right. I think a lot of the work that we did together at the Kettering Foundation, looking at including the voices of young people who haven't always stayed on the same path and have had differing ways to end up there, exactly aligns with that. So you answered it, even if it, and I think probably in a much more interesting way than the, like, oh, well, I was a nurse and then I moved to Civic Corps and now I'm here.
Yeah, right. I've been all over the place. But actually, what you're referring to, and now what as I think over the history, that single experience really created a passion in me that I think has been essential, underlying all the work that I've been involved in since that time. And I will admit to you, and I'm having a little trouble admitting this, but I'm about to have my 75th birthday. So I've been all over the place in that period of time. It's been a long investment. And I go back to that motivation all the time, and I think about, oh my goodness, and I hope Adam's okay at this point in time, because I've totally lost track. But there's so many young people who have encouraged me over the years, and I can still see their faces because their lives have turned around, and I've gotten to watch that happen, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is really important is that most issues need allies who are not actually in the depths of it, because sometimes that falls on silent ears when I say that I'm struggling and everyone's like, well, that's your circumstance. But when it's not your circumstance, but you see the value in advocating for that person, advocating for change, and making it something that we all care about, I think that's kind of what does push the needle forward, is having allies, having people who are advocates who are willing to step up, even though they're not part of the reaction, or they don't experience the situation that we're talking about. I think that is so crucial. Not that those individuals having a voice doesn't decrease it, but I think it goes back to kind of what NCOC is trying to do around civic life, like getting all inclusive equity, talking about diversity and issues of, to me, sometimes the conversation around civic engagement, and that's why I love the definition that you shared in the beginning and the perspective of NCOC, it has sometimes been a discussion that excludes, not so much includes. It's kind of like, if you have the privilege of having time to give a year of service, or if you have the honor of giving and your school thinks about service learning and not testing. And so those that are on the outside of that, who maybe are raising food to help a neighbor, or doing something to address a community problem, or see a young boy at their school who has an alcohol problem and work to change awareness about that in the elementary schools, that's just as important as the things that have kind of been institutionalized as service and civic work. So anyways, my long reaction to
I'm with you. Amen.
with that. Andrea, Heather, anyone in the audience, any more questions before I jump into my final two questions? All right. So how do you feel like your work makes a difference in social issues or for social good? It could be your role now as interim CEO or in any place throughout your career.
So thinking about social good is a big, it's such a big arena, and we want our world to be better. We want our communities to be better. We want our lives to be better. And, I want things to be good for my family. I have 2 grandchildren who are ages 4 and 7, like your Cameron. I want them to move into a world that is healthier than what we're seeing in many places today. And so I feel that I've missed the mark any number of times, but I also feel that in some ways I've contributed to challenging people to make the world better, and that might be my greatest contribution in hopefully supporting and attempting to empower others to do good, to do the good things, to be positively engaged, and to reach out to individuals who are least likely to be engaged. Mm-hmm. So I think sort of my overall experience has been in that arena, and as always, I hear people say this, and it sounds sort of like placating or something, but I believe that the benefit that I have derived from attempting to do good is far greater than people who've been recipients of whatever I've gotten to be a part of. It's been a blessing to me to be able to live the life I've lived and to be at this point and to still be engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. For the people who are unable to attend the event in Washington, are there other ways they can support your work at NCOC or provide input on some of the initiatives that you all are leading?
Yes. So we are actively soliciting input right now that will actually be utilized to frame the experience in October. So if you all have ideas that we should be thinking about, you have my email, right, Venera? I don't know if it's published or how you get it, but please send me a note, and I'll get it to the right people here. We are working, pardon me? Yes. Oh, yeah. .org, .net? Okay, you could email, according to Sarah, civicrenewal@ncoc.net, and we would get it. But you can also send it to my email if you want to, or to Sarah Stack, stack@ncoc. The our ability to utilize that information, representing folks from around the country in formulating the questions that will be addressed in working sessions, in formulating our overall presentation at the convening is important. So I'm not sure that I said at the beginning that our co-host for the conference, the convening in October, is Peter Levine, the Tufts University Tisch Center for Civic Life. So we're building on an extensive research base, and we are, with intent, attempting to bring the community together with that research base to learn from each other and to more appropriately apply what we know at the community level. So any input would be most welcome.
Great. And I put the civic renewal at ncoc.net was the ending. Yes, I put that in the chat, and so we'll add that to the video if anyone has any input they'd like to provide. And then for interns, I will share the contact information for Sally and probably Sarah as well, so that we're open. You can add something to the conversation. If there are no other questions, Heather or Andrea, what is one piece of advice, Sally, you would give to someone who's looking to work in your field or in your position? And I think given that you play kind of two roles with the interim CEO role now, maybe the position one day leading an organization, and then also just kind of with someone who has an interest in civic engagement, civic life, civic work, what would be the advice?
So I think the most important thing is to figure out what you're most passionate about, whatever that is, and to then align your thinking and your preparation to get to do what you're most passionate about. And it isn't, I would say from my experience, that it's not a direct line. It's a lot of figuring it out as you go along. So like I said, I couldn't have planned to be at NCOC doing what I'm doing now because I wouldn't have even known that it was a possibility, let alone how to get there. So what has happened in my experience, well, I would say, first of all, figure out what you're most passionate about and then do it with your whole heart. In work experiences, I think showing up early, checking in with your supervisor, whomever, before you leave to make sure that you've done what's expected of you for the day, doing whatever you're doing at the moment, 100%. Doing it in ways that you cannot not be noticed. There are a lot of people working out there. In my experience, the people who work hard and are committed to the passion of the organization, even if it is not their personal passion, will always be recognized. So hard work, making that obvious, and don't be shy about making it obvious, but doing whatever you're doing well, and then looking for opportunities that open up in the area of your passion. So I have followed my passion throughout my entire work life, and I actually dragged my kids along to everything, everything along the way. So I've incorporated them into it, and they've been wonderfully helpful. It's getting to be CEO of an organization, absent starting your own organization, doesn't just happen. I think you have to build a level of respect for the work that you're engaged in ways that you have not only resume building experience, but you have people who have supervised your work. I had people who supervised my work who were wonderful advocates for me. And so it's about connections, advocates, mining the potential and just working really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to add, even though that was typically my last question, I'm going to add a question just because you've talked so much about your children, and you know my little guy. You've known him since before he existed, and how how did you juggle the? And this might seem slightly gendered, but this is right now. We have quite a few mothers in our group, parents in general, in our internship program, who are juggling the school, parenting, life. I'm trying to reach a goal that maybe isn't quite aligned with where I started. Like you started with one career and kind of shifted. Any thoughts or advice or something that you took away from the experience of parenting and working towards your own professional goals, whatever that might be?
Another good question. I think of all the things that I've had the opportunity to be involved in my life, and I've had some nice experiences, including this one. None of it compares to my having had the experience of being a mother. So for me, being a mother is, I mean, it's hard work. Oh my goodness. And kids are challenging. Little kids and big. I mean, it's such a challenge. But I was, in hindsight, when I talk to my kids who are now adults, and I have two, a son and a daughter. The son has two little boys of his own. I, as we talk about, they were growing up. So I was a single mother. I was married, divorced. I've been married and divorced twice. I don't even believe in divorce, and here I am. So, what can I say about that? But to my consistency in terms of connection with them, and I say often that my kids and I grew up together. So we figured it out together, and they knew that I needed help from them. I knew that they needed help from me. And we have continuously over time invested in each other. And they are organizational development people, both of them. And I've learned, they've helped me. Even at NCOC, I still tap into their resources. So building the relationship, one of the things that was most important to them, what they say to me, is that I was able to arrange my schedule always. I always worked, but I was able to arrange my schedule so I didn't miss a ball game and I didn't miss a concert. I mean, a couple probably over the years. But I worked around being able to do the things that were important to them. And that's what they say to me was the most important thing. And it wasn't that I was 100% available. It was that I was able to arrange to do the things that were most important to them.
Mm-hmm. You paid attention to what they cared about and then made sure that that was important to you as well. Even if maybe you weren't at every school play, the play that really mattered,
yeah.
you were.
And they were quick to let me know what really mattered.
Yeah. And then just one more kind of gendered question. I don't know why this is on my brain today, but as women, I think sometimes we're put into leadership roles, and we haven't always received the mentoring and support to take that on. I'm not that men always do, but I find within my network, often women who are put into positions of leadership haven't always received the support in that growth in their career. It's kind of haphazardly that I'm thrown into this role. What would you suggest for those of us like me who are in a position of leadership? How can I support the next group of women who are coming up behind me to be able to create that culture of mentoring and support that we don't always receive?
So I think you're doing it. I think you're doing it in a very structured and substantial way, and I applaud you for that. I think it's a remarkable thing that you're doing in developing others, and that's really a measure of a great leader. Are you investing in helping others? And I think part of what has allowed me, so I grew up at a time when it was less likely that women would be out front, and I have 3 brothers, and I was a third, and I grew up tough, you know, and sometimes women, I think, have trouble acknowledging their toughness, their perseverance, their ability. I'm glad that happened to you and not to me.
I thought I turned it off, but there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry. Of course it would be my phone at the last 5 minutes when you're making a really important point. Sorry, Sally. Go ahead.
That's okay. So the answer is you're already doing it.
And you said you grew up tough, though. I wanted to hear that part.
Yeah, I
With
said
your brothers.
I had 3 brothers. I played football. I did, you know, they had teams and they always were short somebody, so I got to be the other person. And I think the confidence that comes from just being tough and hanging in there builds on itself. I don't think we start out being confident particularly. I think we learn that, and the more times we don't let outside influences detract us from what we want to do or where we're headed, the more we learn that we can do that. And for the most part, I've been treated fairly. But I didn't wait for someone to treat me fairly, to do things. I just went ahead. And I think earning respect over time is a great thing. And I have to admit that oftentimes, even now, I'm far less confident going into a situation than I give the appearance of being. So I don't, you know, I think there's something to be said for making up your mind that you belong at the table, that you have something to offer, and that it's worthwhile. And confidently listening, but also sharing what you know is a right thing.
Yeah. I always say that experts come in all forms. So if you can at least have the confidence and believe in yourself enough, probably sitting at the table in a leadership role, you're going to be scared, but at least,
Exactly.
you know, believe enough that you have some expertise. Whatever that might be, your perspective, your lens on that issue is crucial. So, well, thank you so much, Sally, for giving your time this afternoon and sharing. I learned a ton about you. Did not know you were a PK and this nurse from Ohio that came into this role. When you think about just the journey, it's super exciting and empowering that your life. I think people tend to think that there's like one clear path. And one of the great things about this career series is we've seen how so many varied ways lead to a particular end result. People have come from a variety of backgrounds, and it was just really interesting to hear about your journey to this role. And I'm excited about the work that you're doing in the interim role at NCOC, and hopefully we can add our voice and work and maybe even be in DC, and we can see you in person in October. All right.
We would love to have you.
Yes, we will definitely. I will share the email again with everyone who watches the video, and if you have any questions, I'll put that as the email that they can send them to, so that hopefully you'll get some input from that. So thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.